Okay. So what we said yesterday is that we were just going to follow up on this halacha, um, which is over here. If someone has an empty lot, and that empty lot is creating a nuisance for the neighbors because it's filled with trash, and they do have the right to demand either that the person who owns the lot either build up and eliminate the vacancy, or to create a fencing around it so that people will not be able to use it as a dumping ground anymore. If the owner says he can't afford to make any changes to the property, we force him to sell or to put up a fence, either one. So where's the basis of this? So we started talking about the Ramah in Choshen Mishpat Siman Kufna Nun Hey brings a machlokes when a person's house is open, is accessible, meaning that he hasn't put on sufficient security onto his home. And Ganovim could come and by breaking into his home, because it's not secure, they could potentially break into other houses as well that are adjacent to this person's home. In other words, or another situation could be if a person is, what do they call it, a pack rat or something like that, where he leaves, he allows trash to accumulate in his home, and the neighbors are seeing that his house becomes infested with rats and cats and things like that. So that could create spillover to the neighbors. It's a common situation. So, but the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, deals with a case: can the neighbors or single neighbor compel that neighbor to secure his home to prevent it from being broken into? So Deir Rishona, the first opinion, is brought in the name of this Rishon the Ramah, who says, Kasav Harama, man de mischayev lemigdar bein olevein chavero v'lo gadar, va'asu ganav v'ganvile midi derech hageder chayev l'shlumele. So if a person needed to put up a fence between himself and his neighbor, and he didn't, Ganovim came onto his property, and through his property, they were able to go into the other person's property. So then the person who was negligent, the neighbor who was negligent, has to pay the other neighbor for his damages and losses. And this opinion maintains that even though it's causative damage, why don't you just say it's grama, right? It's causative, and therefore I shouldn't be liable. Nonetheless, the Ramah says as long as he was warned in advance that he needs to um, secure his property, if he fails to do so, he's going to be liable. Velo nihira, so the Tur writes, it's not clear to my father, the Rush, dafilu poretz gedr lifnei behemas chavero biyadayim pater medinei adam ala behema. I don't understand why this shouldn't be grama, says the Tur. He says even if a person were to open, to breach a fence in front of an animal that is the property of his friend, and as a result the animal runs away, I'm not liable. Medina, I may be chayiv medine shamayim, but I'm not liable medine adam. So he says, I don't understand why we would hold a person liable. In that case, it's only a grama. Obviously, what he's done is negligence and so forth, but he shouldn't have to be held liable in Beis Din. The Habach, hiskim l'divrei haramasham. The Bach, however, does agree with the Ramah, and va'ayin shach u'v'nesivas hamishpat v'beis Yosef sham hevi b'shem Rabbeinu Yerucham shekasav b'shem Rabbeinu Moshe Gon Shnei Yisrael. So the Beis Yosef brings the following case: Shnei Yisraelim sheish lahem shtei chatzeros. Two neighbors, two Jewish neighbors. They have two courtyards. Ve'echas mehem churva. One allowed his courtyard to turn into a ruin. Va'amar lo shachein labal churva o banei o gador o machor. And one neighbor tells the guy who's let his property go to pot, he says, listen, either build it up or put a fence around it or sell the property. Sheganavim boim aleinu balayla, because as a result of your allowing your property to go to pot, Ganavim it's going to attract Ganavim and they're going to break in and our whole neighborhood is going to is going to fall you know, to abandon. V'halo omer, shmor atzmacha shal hanisik laharchik atzmo, umayni uezik shabami kocho. The guy who owns the ruined property, says to the neighbor, mind your own business. If you feel unsafe, put up a fence on your property. I don't have an obligation. I'll do it. It's not. I'm not responsible. The Heyer Abbas Yosef u'Tmiyani al zeh heichkar ledavar zeh giri dilei ad kan lashana. And so the Beis Yosef says, I don't see how you could say that this is direct damage if a guy fails to put up his fence. Because of Bikneses Hagdola Sham b'Shem Shuvas HaGaonim. And then another case that's brought down here in the poskim is Ruvain Yishlo Makom Charuv Samach Lebeso Shel Shimon, that Ruvain has a ruin, a property that's basically turned into a dumping, the Nasis Ashba B'Gedola, the Toin Shimon Sheyivna Achurvo Yigdor Shelo Yeshlichu Sham Ashba. And Shimon says, listen, you either got to build it up or put up a fence. I don't want to live next to a garbage dump. Hadin imo, then Shimon is correct. Ve'im toin Ruvain shein lo hotzos, kofen osolimkor l'misha yeshlo. And if Ruvain claims he can't afford it, we compel him to sell the property. The siyim b'chneses hagdola v'lo dami lahach deganovim. And the Knesses Hagdola argues that it's different from the case of Ganovim. There, if the fear is that Ganovim are going to come in and break in and break through your open property, they're going to break into my property. He says that's different. Uvesefer pamones of hisper shehezik zematzu yoser mechshash Ganovim vafilu acholkim gabi Ganovim modim lazeh yuyin sham. The argument being is that the garbage dump, the guy that's allowed his property to turn into a garbage dump, that's constant damage that's coming from his property in terms of odor, in terms of maybe rodents and things like that. Whereas the fear that Ganavim may come and steal is a more remote and not constant nuisance. Okay, so therefore, there is a difference between those two. And the argument, therefore, is that when a guy has a garbage dump, he has more of a responsibility to either clean it up and put up a fence, or he has to sell the property. Okay. Okay, so this makes a lot of sense. It's a machlokes if the concern is security. It's not a machlokes if the issue is your property is a nuisance because it's become a garbage heap and it's attracting rodents and critters and things like that. Okay, let us go on. Next case, Shadayim Shehiziku v'hischayvu l'shalim kol echad mehem machatzis mehanezek ve'echad mehem borach o she'ein lo l'shalim. The case is if two people jointly are responsible for causing damage. Say they're partners in a company, and the company caused damage. Each one, therefore, what do they call it? Jointly and severally?
Yeah, joint tortfeasors are jointly and severally liable.
Okay, so what that means is what happens? So the question now is, what happens if one of the two runs away? So does when you say jointly and severally, does that mean that the one guy who's left assumes all of the liability?
He'd be responsible for the type of thing or half or whatever, but they're both half and whole, right? So the creditor or the victim and the damaged person can come against each or one or both, right? Because they're both liable for the whole thing. Let's say this damage is $1,000. They're each liable for $1,000, and if they're each 50% liable, they're severally liable for 1,000 and the half, right?
Right. So that's the question now. What if one of them, runs away, leaves the country, can't be located? Okay. So yesh omrim shahasheni yeshalem machir mashah chayv al nezek ze ilu asahu levado. So some say that he has to pay what he would have been liable to pay for if he had done the damage himself, meaning he's got to pay for the whole thing. V'yesh cholkin kevin dechavero medina bar tashlumin ela she'en lo mima l'shalim lama yifrazeh bishvilo. Others disagree and say, look, I'm only half liable. I'm only liable for half. Why should I have to pay my friend's portion of the liability? V'lachein yesh lo l'shalim raketz machatzis hanezek shemutal olav l'shalim. And therefore, because it's a machlokes, we can only hold him liable for half. Vim echad mehem hu goy re'eh hadin beha'ara. And if one of the two is a non-Jew, so then we'll see in the footnote that the law may change. So he basically says as follows. This is brought in the Choshen Mishpat, in Siman Taf Yud. He brings a machlokas rishonim. Yesh mi she'omer k'she'echad barach hasheni mischayv l'shalim hakol. So the Tur, quoting the Ramah once again, holds that he's severally, that would be severally if he has to pay the whole thing. Got to pay the whole thing. V'hevi Shulchan Aruch Kedei Rishana v'ayin sham bisma. And then he brings the other opinion as well, meaning that the Shulchan Aruch brings both opinions, that you either have to pay the whole amount or you only have to pay half. V'nir shadas marin kedas hatur bazeh l'ma'ayin sham. Well, the Inyan Yisrael, it would seem that the Shulchan Aruch seems to be siding more that you have to pay the whole amount. Well, the Inyan Yisrael va'akum shehiziku ve'ein efsharos legabos min ha'akum. Let's say you're dealing with a Jew and a non-Jew, and the non-Jew refuses to pay because maybe you took him to, you took the Jew, the Jewish partner, you took him to Beis Din. And the non-Jew says, well, I don't recognize that authority. I'm not going to be held bound by what the rabbi says. Okay, yesh omrim shetalia b'machlokes hatur v'harama v'ayin lamar neshulchan aruch l'inin shneim shehimisu es habehema ke'echad o shibaru es hakli ke'echad mishalmin b'neihem. So some say that it's still a machlokes. In other words, that will not resolve the issue. Because the truth is that the non-Jew is liable for half, so it all depends. So it sounds like, even though he said, look at the footnote if you want to see the halacha, he doesn't have any resolution in the footnote, which is pretty annoying. In other words, there is no resolution, and because there's no resolution, hamotze mechavera olav haraya. You have to, the plaintiff has the burden of proof, and by virtue of the fact that there's no resolution here, you can only make the guy pay half. Okay. All right, next. Amarish b'soch beiso emefshar laharchiko. Okay. A guy who's creating a noise nuisance. Okay. Mutter la'adam lasos b'soch beiso dvarim shemashmiim kol. כגון שיש לו איזו אומנוס בביסו ומכה בכל מיני כלים שמשמיעים קול גדול. A person does have a right to make noise in his home. So for example, let's say he's a handyman and he is banging during the day on all different kinds of construction projects, and they make noise. V'chein mitofeif o guitarist shemit amen beveito o machbesa. Let's say shemit amen beveito. So let's say a mitofeif or a guitarist. I think a mitofeif is that a drummer? I believe that's a drummer. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, a tof. Mitofeif is a drummer. Yeah, I got that right. Guitarist is a guitarist. Okay. Who is practicing at home. He has a right to play music in his house. O machbesa o mazgan, or if a person is running a washing machine or an air conditioner. The chol kayotze bozeh she'osim ra'ash gadol. Anything like that, which makes noise, a person is within his legal rights to operate and his business or his appliances or his musical instruments. And ve'ein ashchenim yecholim limchol al zeh, ve'enim yecholim limono mizeh. The neighbors cannot protest or prevent him from making this noise. V'chol zeh dafka ba'adam bari. Now, he doesn't say what time of the day or night it is, which is concerning, you know. But here's his qualification. He says it all depends on whether the neighbors are healthy or unhealthy. Aval ba'adam ha'chayla o mitzdar harbe kegon shigarim lo ke'ev rosh ve'eno yochol lispol davar zeh yochol la'akev alav. If, however, one of the neighbors is sickly and he's suffering from some kind of illness whereby even a regular noise like the operation of an appliance will cause him great headaches. Yeah, could be. So then there is one opinion that says that he could say, listen, your noise is contributing to my illness, and therefore I can coerce you to stop. The Yeshomrim and some other opinions say that Masha Habori ena yochel limchos davcha shekvar huchzak lasus umis gezu beveso. There's another opinion that is even more stringent upon noise rights, as far as the neighbors having rights to stop noise. The only time that a healthy person cannot prevent a person from making noise is if the neighbor already had established a chazaka of making such noise. This is a normative noise that is the standard. And I've already been doing this. But lechatchila, if a new tenant moves in and he brings in his drum set, then the other neighbors who find it a nuisance do have a right to say, no, not in this apartment.
Nowadays, you have the noise bylaws that require the noise at certain hours, like you were saying. So
Yeah.
at 2 a.m,
Right.
electric guitar might not be the best thing. And also decibels are measured by, the sound is measured by decibel level, right?
Correct. Correct. So he doesn't take any of that into account, at least not halachically. But let's see, he's not done yet. He says, Venera Ladina. It would seem that according to the halacha, im minhag haMedina sha'at shah mesuyemet muter la'ashmiya kol ra'ashim v'yesh ezarash. If the custom of the place where you live is that they allow noise up until a certain time, there's noise ordinances, okay? Im zeh keshemaka bepatish o betupim o keshiyesh seudat erisin shemashmiim shir mechol kayotze bozeh. He says, so then if a guy is making noise on his property, either with a construction instrument like a hammer or with drums, or let's say he's making a wedding party or a Sheva Brachas, and there's a lot of singing and live band, right? Ula'achar hashash shekavu mamshichem lashmiya kol u'ra'ashim yicholim limchos al kain. Then if he goes past the time of the sound ordinance, it's already after 10 p.m., so then you're allowed to protest and stop him from making the noise. Now, what is the origin of this halacha? We've seen this already. Which sefer did we see it in? I think we saw it in the Baruch Omer also. He talked about a noise nuisance. But it seems pretty obvious that you have to abide by the Dina de Malchusa. You have to abide by the convention that is set up by the government. So he brings from the Shulchan Aruch that b'nei mavoyo b'nei chatzer shenase echad mehan uman v'lo michu biyado v'yachar kach rotzim limchos yispar b'simin shacharei ad kan. So he says that if a person moves into a neighborhood and establishes a business in his home, and the neighbors don't say anything, and then later they decide they want to protest, we'll explain this halacha shortly. So he writes in the very next siman, Ein anu yecholim lishon mikol hapatish mikol harichayim. If a guy sets up shop and he's setting up a mill, let's say, or a construction a place where he's a carpenter and he is constantly banging the hammer to build stuff. The neighbors, once they've allowed him to start, they can't stop him afterwards. Velo michu biyado, because he came in, they didn't protest when he started. Okay. Now the Shulchan Aruch has a Haggah. The Ramah writes that even if he comes in and they immediately protest, they have no right to stop him. B'davka b'nei adam b'riyim, but that's only when the people are healthy. Avolim heim cholim v'hakol mazik lahem. But if there are any unhealthy people in the neighborhood where the noise actually compromises their health, yecholim limchos. So he quotes the Rivash as saying that they do have a right to protest. And then he brings the Sma, who writes, that unlike what the Mechaber says, that in other words, this halacha that even lechatchila he can make noise if he wants, is even if he hadn't had a chazaka to do this, but it's a free country, and I can engage in anything that is considered to be tolerable as far as noise. Uvaos Yud Aleph Kasav Shamal Masha Kasav Midin Me'achar Shehechzik Mihu Hechzik Nir Sheinu Rod Salom Recheskos Kemol Shanim Ela Kol Shenikar Shenasa Malachlo V'Shoma V'Lo Michabo Yunin Sham. What is a chazaka? So he says a chazaka would be defined not as 3 years doing this, but any time that everyone can see exactly what I'm doing and they don't immediately make a protest. Even it seems like if it's just one day, right? Now, and then he quotes the Shulchan Aruch further in Siman Kuf Nun Hey, Kol davar sheyadua she'ein hama'ar yochol lisovlo, afal pisha shar b'nei adam sovlo moso, ein lo chazaka keneged me'arer zeh. If a person makes a complaint and it's clear from his health condition that he cannot tolerate the noise, then no matter what kind of precedent and chazaka a guy has, he has to stop. V'hayisi matzoi la'akev alav kagon mitofef beveso lihit amein u'leshachen yesh ke'ev rosh mizeh v'chol kayotze b'zeh. So for example, if a person is a drummer and or if a person and a neighbor says, I mamish get headaches from your drums because I have PTSD or whatever it is, then you can stop him. Then you can, this guy who's getting physically ill as a result is allowed to take him to Beis Din and prevent him from doing it anymore. V'chein kasav harama behedje b'shem harivash kol sheyesh choli harosh lebal hachatzer v'kol ha'aka mazik lo tzarich laharchik artzmo. If a person is getting physically ill from the noise, then the noisemaker has to distance himself or stop making the noise. And then what I wrote, he says that you go according to the Minhag HaMedina, according whatever the convention of the community, the ordinance is, Kol is based on the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Yud Ches. Kol elu hadvarim b'makom she'ein minhag. He says, but all the aforementioned is only when there's no minhag. It's the Shulchan Aruch. Avol b'makom sheyesh minhag helech achar minhag. But whenever there's an established norm, you have to follow the established norm. V'achar lashon rov anshe hamakom, and follow whatever the accepted standard of the community is. V'ayin sham, etc., etc. So therefore, it seems quite clear and straightforward. A person can't say, well, it says in the Shulchan Aruch that I'm allowed to play drums and make noise in my house whenever I want. No, you have to follow the standards of the community. If there's a noise ordinance that passed a certain time, you have to stop. You have to stop. I can tell you that I'm moving to, if you're anywhere in Jerusalem, it's noisy during the day. I think they started around 6 a.m. With the noise. Pretty much everywhere in Yerushalayim, you have to tolerate noise pollution. Um, and especially in our neighborhood where they're going to be doing a lot of construction. There's constant noise during the day. And at night, I think by whatever it is, either 9 or 10 o'clock, I have to stop, you know.
11 o'clock.
Is it 11 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you had issues with noise, Wayne?
Well, there are, you know, um, places around, I think, where everyone lives in Jerusalem where noise is part of the environment. Like, there's not far from here, there's a B'nai Akiva, um, gathering place. I don't know what they call it, but there's constantly music um, and announcements. And then across the street, there's a school, and they always have celebrations of one sort or another on music things. And then we're about to move, and one of the big things that people see, this is another street over, is
Oh, you're moving?
there's a wedding hall down the street. And all these places, they go till 11 o'clock and then they have to shut off.
Uh-huh. Are you moving because the landlord needs the place, or are you moving because you didn't
Yeah,
want
he sold it.
to? Okay.
So yeah, we're moving one street over.
All right. Very good.
Yeah.
So you're in Arnona, right? Is that where you are?
No, I'm in Baca and
You're in Baca.
I'm moving to Makor Hayim.
Oh, so one block over, it's got a different name?
Yeah. And in fact, that area only has one street. No, maybe two. I think two streets.
What's the name of the
Oh,
street?
Makor Hayim.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Very imaginative there. But one of the things I wanted to say is I think there should be a distinction between, you're making noise, like you use this example of somebody who's like a contractor in his house and he's making noise, he's banging all day. And there should be a distinction between someone operating a business in their home and someone living in their home and making household noises. But, maybe there isn't. I don't know.
I think a lot of it will depend on the zoning laws. If a person is permitted to operate a business out of his home, so then and I don't know what the zoning laws in Yerushalayim are. Like, I mean, what if a person is a musician and they're playing music all day.
Yeah, that
Rabbi,
happens.
Rabbi,
Yes, yes, sure.
we in Bat Yam in the building that we're in. Uh, there's a neighbor who blasts music, not, and sometimes it's in the middle of the night, and they're only allowed to, play their music to and disturb people up until 11 o'clock. And the police have come over as well to tell them that they have to lower it.
Oh, and it has it worked?
Yeah, but it's an interesting neighbor, and sometimes he goes back to his old shtick. But they come again, the police.
Are you usually the one who calls?
No, they divided by it.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
All right. Okay, let's live in peaceful quietude. Okay, have a great day, everybody. We'll hold it here.
Yom Tov.
Bye.